I have.
Good
Hi.
afternoon, everybody. How are you all today? Thank you for joining us. As you can tell by my picture, I am not at home. I am on the road. My husband and I are traveling to go see some family and just have a little bit of a getaway. And so I hope that my phone, which is giving me my signal, holds strong during this and I'll be able to stay with you the whole time. If not, and I drop off, then we'll just catch up with you next week. And Fran might be getting a phone call where she'll have to drop off for a little bit. So this could be a very interesting day.
It's communication. How we communicate in today's day and age. You got to be flexible.
You absolutely do. You absolutely do. So, hi, Fran. How are you this week?
Well, oh, hi, Alex. Life is so interesting.
Always, especially this past year. But what specifically this week? Well, hold on. Let's talk about because you weren't with me last week.
Yeah. How did that
So,
go?
I think Greg did a great job. I
Mm-hmm.
think the viewers enjoyed him. We shared some videos of his daughter doing some cooking things with him,
Oh,
and
awesome. Yeah.
yeah, so it was. I think it went well. How was your adventure?
Well, it didn't quite go as planned. I had to remotely support it, but it was good. They had great, like, over the alphabet worth of people came,
Awesome.
and they had some legislators come and media. So there's quite a few news articles. What's sad to say, I've discovered, is what is appears to be occurring and what is actually occurring is so poorly portrayed.
Yeah. What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, have you seen in the news how it says long-term care facilities opening up for visitation? And they're
No,
making all the,
but to be fair, I don't watch television, so
okay. Well, and they're making it appear that it's as prior to COVID. Well, guess
oh,
what? It's
it's
not.
not
And most facilities still aren't even open.
right.
And if they are, even though their new guidance has just come out, it came out right prior to what would have been on prayer day,
Okay.
the other prayer day. They A lot of facilities aren't even covering it or aren't even following that. So, but the media is portraying it as facilities are open, but they're not. And so loved ones are still locked out away from. Can you imagine being apart from your husband for all the calendars?
No.
Or looking through a window and communicating through a window where you can't even hear each other and you can't touch each other, and that's how you're going to celebrate life, your
Right.
anniversary, and
Yeah.
that's still occurring. So there's still so much to be done, but it was good. And there's a bill that's going before legislators, or it's made it into a committee. I don't know. This kind of stuff is beyond me. I just do the technology at this point. It's like, I'll do your technology, but I have no idea how to. But so
Right. Well, we could pull
there
up
are.
a Schoolhouse Rock episode of how a bill becomes a law.
Yes, we could. But you know, maybe I'm becoming jaded because it's it doesn't happen the way originally things were supposed to happen. And we're just going to
Yeah.
leave it at that, because that could just be a slippery bad slope to go down at this point.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's the way of a lot of things. People get things moving and start legislation for very valid reasons and very good intentions. And then unfortunately, after a certain amount of time, things aren't the way that they were intended to be, and yeah, it's very sad that that happens that way. And whoa, sorry, I don't know if you could all hear that.
It's okay.
I'm not driving, so we don't have to worry. It's not my fault. Um, but construction, snow,
Life happens.
yeah, all kinds of fun stuff. So
Yeah.
other drivers not driving as best as they should be, maybe, or could be. So, and it's difficult to communicate with other drivers because we don't have any sort of system other than hands and horns, and those aren't always received well. So
No, they're not. And sometimes looks.
yeah, that's not always a great thing either. So
No.
so you messaged me and wanted to talk about communication. So we talked a little bit about how you were supporting the efforts last week virtually, and what else is going on. So you were
What brought on my thought process of communication? Yeah. Okay. And I know we've touched on this a long time ago. Different ways in which we can communicate with our schools, and how it can be written within the IEP, and whether it's followed or not, and what has worked well with my children and what hasn't, and other people have touched base. Well, I kind of circled back to it because when someone communicates with you, that they always say there's always two sides to a story.
Mhm.
So you kind of go, well, okay. Well, when something was communicated to me by someone, and they were very adamant, but they chose to handle it themselves, and I thought, oh, that's super cool, awesome. And then I got a phone call saying, okay, now you need to step in, and I was very proud. It was my daughter, and I was very proud of her for saying you need to step in. Now, but she had prior wanted to try to handle it, and so I did, and I spoke with. I received a much different story than what was told to my daughter.
Oh.
And what my daughter had conveyed to me. And it really aggravated me. Because there could be falsehood or miscommunication from my daughter, but in the way that she had conveyed it to me, I knew she couldn't have. I mean, it was truth what she was sharing with me.
Right.
And I was pretty much told she lied.
Oh.
And so that just made me very upset. And the struggles that she had to go through she stood up for herself. Excuse me, sorry, itchy nose. And then she was still not communicated with appropriately. And what if I didn't believe her? Then what would that have done for her? She would have been like, I did what I was supposed to do. I didn't lose my temper. I didn't cry. I didn't yell. I didn't scream. I acted maturely, yet. But I'm glad I listened to her and worked it out. But so it made me think, how do we communicate? How can we proactively communicate, set up lines of communication? And then I had another incident with my son and communication. Well, I've had quite a few, but I'll tell you the funny one. I couldn't call into his house. He blocked me. I remember I got him that
right.
communication tool, a phone that has a picture, so he could call.
Right.
Well, there's some way on there that he can somehow block numbers. Well, there's only a couple numbers programmed in his phone, and somehow I think when he's pushing buttons, he does it. And I couldn't call him, and he was communicating to me because he had called me all my both hands worth of fingers and both feet worth of toes times in a morning. That's how many times he called me. And when he's communicating that, even if he says he's fine and everything's okay, what he's saying is that he's not fine. And he needs help without even knowing that he needs help.
Yeah.
So I couldn't even
Right.
call back when I was able to because I was in a meeting. Um, and then I didn't know the staff that was on, so I couldn't communicate that way. And I called the office, and they weren't answering their phones, and no one was answering their cell phones. So communication had come to a complete standstill. My only course
Right.
of communication at that point would have been to drive to where he lives. So it made me
Right.
start thinking about technology and communication and how we rely on technology now.
Mm-hmm.
And so that brought up those thoughts. So I don't know. That's kind of where I went with that.
Yeah, well, I mean, I told my mom that I would be traveling today. And she says, "Oh, so no Friday with Fran?" I said, "Oh, no, I can use my phone as as my internet connector." And she's like, "All this technology." She says, "All the things that, can be done and like this, I mean, I'm nowhere near my home where my Wi-Fi is, but yet
Mm-hmm.
we're able to communicate with each other and our audience. And in the past, when you've joined us, from the Capitol or wherever, you've been at other people's houses, and so it is
Where
a
I mean,
wonderful
right?
tool.
Yeah.
But
Right now I'm not where I'm wired. I'm Wi-Fi.
yeah, and so it is a wonderful tool when it works, but it doesn't always work. Like I said, there might be a time when I drop off because maybe I lose the signal from my phone, or maybe my battery dies, or um,
Mm-hmm.
we just it isn't working for whatever reason. And just like with your son, um, not being able to reach people, it's kind of like, a lot of people talk about they got rid of their landlines, their house phones.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and we're still holding on to ours. And we've debated multiple times about whether or not to get rid of it, and we still continue to keep it because we think, well, what if something happens that somehow our cell phones aren't reliable anymore? Then at least we still have.
Unless your landline isn't truly a landline.
Or the people that we're trying to connect to don't have a landline either.
That is true.
And they only have cell phones. So yeah, and throughout the whole COVID, I've thought about that several times, that even though the kids weren't in schools, they were still getting to see their classmates, at least if they were able to join a virtual meeting. And that wasn't the case when we were in school. If we had a snow day or snow weeks, we just didn't see
Mm-hmm.
people. Traveling, getting mail, we used to have to wait. I sometimes think about the fact that, in the world wars, you're
You're breaking
to hear
up.
something.
There you are.
Yeah. And now your loved one goes away to the military, and you get a phone call when they get to base, and you get, information of where they are going next within a day or two, where you don't have to
Mm-hmm.
wait even for a regular snail mail to get from one place to the other. So we have all this great technology and all these great ways to communicate. So why do we still feel so alone?
Because, oh my, what happened? Why do we feel so alone?
Yeah.
Because we have too much technology. Because we're
Possibly.
so used to instantaneous communication. And it's not always possible.
Yeah.
And we've become where we don't know how to self-soothe, or
You're right.
and we're always looking for someone to fix it.
Yeah. Yep, exactly. And
Just a random thought.
it is difficult to form relationships. My husband and I were talking about it earlier today, that I have met a lot of people through my networking because of my business, but I haven't literally met those people in person yet. So while I have spoken to some people weekly for several months, I don't feel like I know the person yet.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess that's probably happening in schools too, where students have never met their teacher in person this year. They've only ever seen that teacher through a screen.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know how much people who aren't in the education system realize the I'm going to say it, there needs to be balance with how you are using your technology. You're right, Alex.
I'm sorry. I was waiting
Uh,
for it. Come here, bub.
and I don't know. I
Come
just
here.
Cooper
Come here.
trying to come up.
Yeah, but it's kind of blocked with my wheelchair and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Hold on.
So
If I
it's difficult to have those relationships. I mean, for me, that was one of the biggest aspects of my teaching, was having
Mm-hmm.
that relationship with my students. And that, I feel, is
Right.
got to be a lot harder to form when it's just through a screen the whole time.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And the way
See.
the year is going, some of these students may never see that teacher in person, because
Mm-hmm.
some of the kids are still not in school yet. They're still just
Right.
virtual, and they're still talking that they're going to be virtual until the end of the year. So that saddens me, because that's a whole year's worth of students that some teachers won't have that same impact. They won't possibly have that. I mean, I've not been teaching for 4 years now, 5 years now, but even besides not teaching, I still have relationships with students and their families that I haven't taught for a decade or longer.
Mm-hmm.
And I don't know that that's going to happen with a lot of teachers this year, like that's been able to happen.
True.
So yeah, I mean, communication is different, I think, than having a relationship.
Yes. So what is realistic communication in today's day and age? What is realistic to expect when even okay, this is random, but so you're having a text conversation with somebody
Mm-hmm.
and you're coming to the tail end of it and you asked a question, someone else answers okay. Well, do you answer with a thumbs up or was the okay sufficient and can you end your conversation? Or do you have to keep going back and forth with your thumbs up and okays?
Yeah, that's an interesting one, because I was having a conversation the other day with somebody, and I'm like, okay, do I have to keep responding? Like, I felt like the conversation was over. So
Huh.
I do. I feel like there has to be a sort of
Huh.
a wrap up, or hey, great chatting with you, or talk to you again sometime, or something
Mm-hmm.
to signal that the conversation is over.
So,
Is that
I
What do
mean,
you feel about that?
I don't know, because I guess maybe it depends on the depth of the friendship and relationship you already have with that person.
Yeah.
Or let's say someone sends out a reminder. Do you need to respond? Okay, got it, heard ya. Or do you just go, okay, well, they sent the reminder?
Right. I'll be
Is it
honest.
appropriate to say, I received your message, I understood it, and this is my response? Do you respond within the group text or do you respond individually?
Right. Yeah. And I don't know. I suppose there's etiquette for all of those things. Um, but sometimes I'll be honest, I get tired of the media, or not the media, the
technology
medium that I'm using, so whether it's
Mhm.
the technology, whether I'm texting or I'm emailing, or if it's this kind of thing, and I'm just like, I'm done. I can't do anymore. I can't answer another person. I can't email another person, or text another person. And sometimes it's probably not nice, but I don't respond, and then other times I get those remind messages and I'm like, oh, I got it, thanks, or yeah, I'll see you later, or so there's probably etiquette versus actuality.
Mhm.
And yeah, probably the etiquette is what you should do, but does everybody do that all the time? No.
And then how do you deal with those hurt feelings when you have one idea of how that etiquette should be and how another person, and you don't even know you've offended somebody?
So my advice to that is behaviors are communication. I know I say that a lot, but I really believe it. And so if you're texting, say, example, back and forth with somebody, and you've been pretty quick with your responses back and forth for an amount of time, and then all of a sudden you send a reply to something or a question or whatever, and you are expecting them to respond in return because that's what's been your exchange for the last however much time, and they don't, I've had to learn to say, well, maybe something else took their attention. I have to, and I was always very bad about this prior, but I have to not assume that I have done something wrong or offended in some way.
Right.
Or that they're thinking a certain way, or because I have no idea. And so in the, could be just a minute longer than the response time prior. It could be an hour longer, or a whole clock period, a whole day before they respond again. And sometimes, it's like, okay, it happens. And the other thing that I've noticed is that sometimes texts don't flow back and forth as quickly either. I've been in an exchange with people, and then all of a sudden, for whatever reason, their text that they just sent doesn't come to me until much later. So that's another reason why I try not to panic or pay too much attention about if I don't get a quick response back from someone that I had been getting that response back from before, because I'm not guaranteed that my text has arrived on their phone. If there's a pause, I often end then not sure if that's right or not. And yeah, I mean, Alex, it's tough, because I think every communication is probably different, not just between who you're talking to and how you're talking to them, but in that individual, interaction. So
it's fluid.
Absolutely. I think so anyway.
So
what do you think?
What is a realist? Okay, what do I think? I think it depends on the established relationship prior to that communication, what sometimes our expectations are, and whether they're realistic or not. Those are our expectations probably a lot of times. And so if it skews off of that, then probably that's when I start questioning myself. Well, did I do something wrong, or are they upset, or they got a lot going on in their life? And then sometimes if they're not responding, it just triggers I think I'm going to be praying for them, because maybe they've got some things a lot on their plate and they just don't have time. And so I think that then that brings back that word grace and just patience. Patience is really hard for me. I think it's hard for a lot of people, and just being, yeah, and you're right, Alex. A set, you don't think there's a set rule. It's on each conversation. It probably is. So where I was gonna ask you, Shelley, was because I'm full of questions today, so you're gonna be the answer man.
Oh, I'll do my
Or
best.
the answer woman. Um, is what is a realistic timeline from when you communicate something with an educator for when you should expect a response back?
That would, in my opinion, depend on the kind of communication. So if you are asking about holding a meeting, um, or you are asking a more formalized question, meaning checking on if you've asked them for data, or like I said, asking them for a meeting, or asking them for clarification on a topic that isn't specific related to the day, then I would give a couple days or maybe even a week. But if you're asking a more pressing question and a more informal question, like say, I heard there was an incident at school today with my child. I would like to, get your thoughts on that incident, or can you tell me about it, or something like that. I would hope, a couple days max, because teachers are people, and their school
Teachers are
hours.
people?
I know, weird concept, right?
Really? Whoa. Did you know that, Cooper? Teachers are people.
And they
Sorry.
have, that's okay. They have their, sorry, I just saw some, I guess they were sheep. I don't know if those were on the side of the road. Um, and, so they have their children that they're going to take care of. They may have appointments after school. They may have, meetings after school. And so I get, like I said, I guess it just depends on the kind of question that you're asking and the kind of information that you are wanting them to give you. They may have to gather some information. It may not just be that they can give you whatever you're asking for immediately. I always try to communicate frequently, daily, hourly with some of my parents, depending on what specific thing that we were, like if we were having some behavioral issues, if we had some health issues, I would try to communicate much more frequently than if I just was seeing a student for some academic goals that we worked on. So the severity of what you're asking can I think lead to the amount of time of communication.
Okay.
Did that answer it? Yes,
Yes.
but no? Okay.
Yes, it answered it.
Okay.
Yeah. So, like with my son, we used a comm log, a communication log, a notebook in the beginning when he was little, and then as he got older, his person with him didn't always want to fill it out, so it kind of fell to the wayside because it was too much of a bother.
Yeah.
Rather than it wasn't an effective communication tool, it was just too much of a bother for them.
And that, I think, needs to be addressed for that person, for them to get an understanding of why it is so important.
And it was addressed.
And yeah, I mean, trying to appeal to somebody's caring part of them, and say, I don't know if you have kids or you don't have kids, but if you have kids and your child comes home and can tell you everything that happened throughout the day, or you don't have to worry about your child throughout the day, because your child will speak up for themselves or can speak up for themselves. You may not understand why this is so important for me, to have an idea of what's happening throughout their day. But my child doesn't come home and tell me things, and I do worry because my child won't speak up for themselves, and they might misconstrue things. And so even if they do come home and tell me something, it might not be the scenario that happened, or I might not be able to get all of the details that happened. And so, if you can just write me notes of, I took notes for some students because we were potty training them, and potty training was something that they were concerned with for health reasons. So, we would have to say how many times the child attempted and how many times the child succeeded at going to the bathroom. And some people don't understand why that's important. But, explaining that, look, this is difficult, this is causing health problems for my child. I need to know, how many times they're trying or how many times they're going, or, it's important for me to know what they're eating and how much they drink during the day because of the health issues.
Right.
And sometimes it is just a matter of explaining it very thoroughly. And sometimes they're still going to find those occasional people that are going to say, well, it's not my job, or it's too much to do with my job, or I don't, I still don't understand why you need it, or I still don't want to do it, or, unfortunately, those happen. I hope those are the exception to the rule rather than the rule.
Mm-hmm. What? Yes. Hello.
What's going on, Cooper?
He's needy because he got Allison put him in the house because he wouldn't stop barking.
Oh.
So he's upset, but they're cutting wood behind us, so he's barking at them cutting the wood.
Yeah, and I just thought of something that I want to make sure I say. I know we've said this in the past when we've talked about it, but if there's somebody that wasn't with us when we talked about it before, that communication logs are something that can be put into the IEP, and the frequency and the type. Some people want a notebook, like you mentioned that you had. Some people, an email is fine. A text. A lot of schools don't like for their teachers to use texts because they're using their own personal cell phone to do that. And so the school then doesn't have any way to protect their teachers because they're not using school provided devices. So thankfully I always had good rapport with my families that I worked with, but I did have a situation where it could have turned out really badly for me because I was using my cell phone, and from a legal standpoint, that was all on me. I didn't say anything inappropriate. I didn't do anything inappropriate, but the school wouldn't have the ability to track and legally prove what I had said or didn't say. They were only going to be able to rely on me, and while I'm a trustworthy person, they still it still would have been questioned. Well, did this person really give up all their records of all the back and forth, or did they really share everything, or did they delete messages or whatever? So it didn't turn out badly for me. But that's something to consider when you're asking your teachers to text you. They may not be allowed to from their schools. It was very strongly suggested to me that I not. I was never told I couldn't, but it was told to me by my administration. We would really prefer that you not use your cell phone. I took the chance. Not everybody is going to make that choice. So,
and I in the past, and even currently, I do communicate some with texting, but then some is I tend to do mostly emails because it also shows a line of communication.
Right.
and it follows it for me as well. And if I'm wanting to say, well, I did say this, or if I've forgotten how I said this, I can research it as well.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. It's way easier to look in an email and find that sort of thing than it seems to be for me, at least. Maybe it's not, but for me, I understand how to search it easier, and it's easier to pull it up, it seems, for me if it's in an email versus on a text message.
Oh, I can find things in text, but I have a different type phone, I think, than you do. So,
well, and that could be too. Yeah. And again, that's why I said for me, it was easier that way. Other people, it might be via text.
He wants to be center today.
I know he wants to be. I'm telling you, he's a camera hog. He wants.
It looked like I have feet. Oh my goodness, Cooper, stop. So, anyway.
So, what other questions do you have?
Okay, so we've communicated in that. We've talked about text. Okay, so let's go with communication via, let's say, video, like what we're doing now.
Mm-hmm.
This type, or there are different ways you can do it, but a video conference, let's say.
Yeah.
Is it reasonable to expect the same behaviors that you would have as if you were meeting with that person in person? If you were in a meeting, if you're having a meeting in person, you would expect the same behaviors and manners as you would have as if whether you're video or live. Correct?
Yeah, I think it's reasonable to expect that. I also think you're probably going to be let down in your expectations.
Yes, I have discovered that.
And I don't know if you've had personal experience or not, if that's why this question was there, but I've been in several meetings where, there are several people in a room, but they're all on separate devices. And so they have to mute themselves because otherwise you get the feedback and you'll get all these extraneous noises and whatnot. Or even if they're in separate locations and they're muted because they don't want, extraneous noises from their home. And then the problem that I've found is, especially when the people are in the same room and they're muted, they'll start, and the masks are on. I can tell, or at least I think that's what I'm seeing, is that they're talking. But I can't hear them, and I can't read their mouths because I can't see their mouth, and they're muted. Do side conversations happen at IEP meetings or any kind of meetings in person? Yes. I feel like people are, I don't want to call it taking advantage of it, but I think they're forgetting what their, what it appears that they're doing. Because to me, if you're having a side conversation, it's a side conversation because you don't want everybody to know what you're saying. Right? Do you think that's true?
Mm-hmm. Or unless you have a chipmunk like me run through and then you just like randomly are blurting things out that may not be related to in the moment, but it just ran through because you were muted and you weren't focused on at that point on which.
Right. Yeah. So, I've been in meetings, and I think it probably is worse when it's a contentious meeting to start with, because you're already on edge with that, with that environment. And then if you, like the other day, I was in a meeting like this, it was an IEP meeting, and somebody brought a cup up to their mouth and they took a drink, but then they kept the cup so you couldn't see their mouth. And to me, it looked like they were either chewing or talking, but I couldn't hear because they were muted, and I couldn't be sure of what thing they were doing because of the mask.
Right.
So it's really difficult. I think we just have to be aware and really, really aware of what we ourselves are doing and how that's being perceived by other people.
Right. Well,
So
okay,
it's a
so
reasonable expectation to say that you would have the same behaviors.
I was kind of going along the lines also of, um, let's say you were meeting with a group of kids or something, and you're trying to lead that meeting, and you would, if the kids were with you in the room, they would be expected to pay attention and to do and to be focused on that. But when they're on Zoom or Google Meets or whatever you're using, whatever, they may be just semi staying on focus, but you have parents coming in and out, joining in on the conversation, handing them food to eat, calling them away from the meeting because they need some. And so, uh, how do you, what are reasonable expectations for things like that?
I don't know. And when you figure it out, let me know, because I I often think that with our teachers, you know, and I do online tutoring, you know, and I'm kind of the same way. Like I think we just have a natural tendency, because the person is there, to talk to them, you know, and we have to stop ourselves from having those conversations, you know. I think they'll start, but then one of you has to go, oh, wait a minute, you know, this isn't appropriate. This is school time, or this is a time when you've set aside to meet with this person, or, you know, whatever whatever it's about. But that, I mean, again, I don't know if you were referring to classroom teachers and classroom settings, but I think about that. Like, you're not in your own classroom. As a classroom teacher with students in a classroom, I can discipline my students. I can, you know, I have my rules and they have to follow my rules. But when I'm tutoring virtually, or these teachers are teaching virtually, those students aren't physically in their classroom, but they're in their classroom in the sense that they're being taught by that person. So I just think that's a very unique dynamic that, I don't know, I guess maybe you set parameters at the beginning and then you remind of those parameters as you go on. But know that those parameters are going to, I feel, get broken all the time, because again,
So then who in is responsible for helping follow through on those parameters?
It's a good question. I don't know. You know, I mean,
I would say it's the parent. If it's a classroom or a meeting or...
Well, see, that's the thing though. But so if you have your expectations because you're the teacher and the parent has a different expectation.
But let's say though, as the teacher, you've communicated those parameters to the students and parents.
Right.
So the parents in the room, shouldn't they be helping with that? Or at least trying to follow those same parameters? Or is that unreasonable expectation?
I don't know. I mean, I don't know that you can give a blanket answer for that, because I think there's so many different scenarios going on in every, I mean, there was always that way in every classroom before, but now there's even more different scenarios going on in classrooms. And I don't know how much you can expect the parents to help or not help or not be involved. Maybe not help was the way to say that, but not be involved. You know, I mean, it depends on the age of the student, I think. It depends on the ability of the student to maintain their focus and use the technology. And, you know, because I've heard both sides of, you know, I've heard from parents and I've heard from teachers of, well, the teacher is saying, well, go to this website and share your screen and do this and do that. Well, not everybody's internet works as fast. Not everybody knows how to share the screen. Not everybody knows how to, go from tab to tab and copy and paste and all these different things that the teachers are asking. And without the teacher being there to actually, manipulate the environment to be able to help, I'm not sure how much responsibility you can ask of the parents, because technically during that time, the child is supposed to be at school.
Right.
I don't know that there's one answer that would work for every situation. And I don't know who to say to be, yes, this is the group that's responsible, whether it's the parents or the school, or it's a youth minister, or it's a, whatever the environment is for the meeting.
I think as you're saying this, what's coming to mind to me is clear expectations, but how do you communicate those clear? Here we're back to communication. Communicating the clear expectations that you have of what and who is responsible for those expectations.
Yeah, and then what do you do when those expectations aren't met?
Right.
Because I think that was like the gist of your original question, was when those expectations, when somebody doesn't do what they're supposed to be doing, how do you fix that?
Mm-hmm.
And I guess, it's a lot of communication, I guess. And a lot of figuring out what everybody is comfortable with or what everybody is willing to tolerate. Because we're not going to make everybody comfortable. So we have to be willing to be understanding and offer grace to our parents and to our teachers and their families.
I know it's Alex's word, balance.
Yes, we need that balance. Absolutely.
Yeah.
And mostly what we're talking about is, special education and communicating with our, but I mean, it doesn't have to be only what we're referring to. But so in my head, I'm thinking of teachers, just like you would have the parameters for your classroom teachers when you were in the classroom setting. You're not going to probably call your child's classroom teacher at 8:00 at night. And with this type of setting, you should also have that same respect, that you can email them, or you can text them if that's a situation that you've worked out, but don't expect a reply the same night, or even within the first hour or two of school, because some teachers have to, they don't have a prep period and first thing in the morning, and they don't, they may get to school early, but they have meetings, or they have other things that they have to do to prep for their day, and they don't have a chance to look at their emails right away.
Right.
So that's why I was saying earlier, when you asked that, like, what's a reasonable amount of time to expect to get a response from a teacher? It depends on what you're asking, when you sent it,
right.
Now, I would hope that they would have a chance to respond within 24 hours, but not always.
You're breaking up. Breaking up is hard to do. You totally broke up. Would you like to read that again?
Okay. So how do you fix a problem with communication when there's no communication? So my question, Alex, is, are we talking about relationships with adults, or are we saying that the child doesn't have the communication ability?
We're losing you, Shelley.
Got a teeny
So,
tiny little signal. We're
So, Alex, did you get that? If you're still with both, she says.
okay. So if a child doesn't communicate in a typical, can you hear? Am I there?
Now you're there. Hi. You're freezing again.
You know, we're obviously verbal people, and we have the ability to verbalize our thoughts and our feelings. But that's not the only way to communicate, which I'm sure you know. But people can communicate with their eyes. We can use communication devices. We have low-tech and high-tech communication ways. You can use pictures, yes, no, and touch boards. I mean, there's lots of different ways for somebody who is nonverbal or paraverbal. If that person is choosing not to communicate, you may have to come up with creative ways. Not communicating. What's their communication behind their behavior of not communicating? Is it?
What are they communicating by not communicating? I think the green one's not mine. You are totally breaking up, Shelley. We're losing you and cannot hear anything you're saying.
Oh, we're at a higher ground. Can you see me now?
We can see you, but we can't hear you.
Oh, you can't hear me. Oh, well, that's even worse.
Yeah, you keep breaking up. Yeah, verbally. So pretty much all I heard. I don't know if anyone else can hear it. How about now?
Can you hear me now?
I can hear. Go ahead. Try again. Nope. Hey, what if you go off of your video and just talk? I don't know. Can you still see me? So, Alex, what I would say, I don't know if I'm still going, is that you, that you communicate what you can.
Uh-oh, I'm back. Hear me?
You communicate, yes. If you communicate what you can, and once you've done all you can, you have to leave it in that person's, and then you can't. You just have to let it go and just know that you've done all you can. You're back.
Yeah. Are you still talking about what do you do when they don't communicate with you?
Yeah. And my thought was, well, you communicate and then you just leave it. You just leave it in their lap and you've done all you can then at that point. Are you agreeing or disagreeing with that, Shelley?
Well, going out again. I think, again, it depends on the situation. Like, if you can walk away and you don't need that communication with that person in order to move forward in the situation, I agree. But if this is a teacher or a colleague or a spouse or somebody that you're going to need to continue to work with, and you can't really walk away from it, then see if you can figure out what their communication is behind the communication of not speaking to you.
I feel like today's conversation has been a round robin of circling. Has been a round robin. I feel like we've been on that traffic circle that circles, and we keep coming back to the fact that communication is complicated, and there's varying degrees and depths and ways of communicating, and we all communicate differently.
Yep.
So every situation is unique.
Yeah.
Every communication, every verbal or every exchange of whatever is unique to
Right.
that situation.
And you can have multiple ways to communicate with multiple people throughout your day. You know, I mean, I just think about myself today. I've had in-person conversations. I've had phone calls. I'm virtually communicating with you. You know, I've had more formal phone calls and a more informal phone call. You know, so yeah, I totally agree with that.
Sorry, this is like draining today for some reason. Trying to communicate has been a struggle. Because, like, I'm getting distracted by the background behind you.
Oh.
Because for me, it's like, they're driving. Oh, wait, they're going under an overpass because I can tell because it's dark. You know, it's so my communication has, and then there's a multitude of people coming in and out of my house, and my dog's been distracting, and I have my window cracked so I can see people walking by, which I normally don't. So for me, communication has been very difficult, even in just this amount of time we've had.
Well, yeah,
So, yeah.
and it is. It's because it's an exchange. You know, it's not solely up to you to control how the communication happens. So, you know, you have to remember that too, that, you know, it isn't necessarily anything about you, but something that's going on with the person or the something that's going on with the person you're communicating with. You know, like when I saw the whatever they were, the sheep or whatever, you know, I was like, okay, I'm used to seeing cows, but that was different, you know, so that took my attention away. But that had nothing to do with me not wanting to hear what you were saying at that time. So, you know, kind of having that too in your mind that, and we've said this before, you know, it's, we're running out of time. It's not, I wasn't looking. We've had so many connection issues that I wasn't even really paying attention, but it's, now I don't even remember what I was going to say. It's not always about you, that we have to look outward. It's not always thinking inward and focusing inward. That's, you know, which is what we do when we start to feel that we have done something wrong, or that, you know, that we've upset somebody by saying or not responding or whatever, is we're looking inward, and we need to continue to look outward. And like you said, you know, if you don't hear back from somebody quickly, you start to pray for them because maybe something happened and they can't respond to you right away or in that same time frame that you had been going back and forth. Two-way street, right? That's what they call it.
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. Yep. Well, how are we going to wrap this up?
Communication is a work in progress.
I agree. Yep. It's very important. It's one of probably the most important aspects of our lives, but it is complicated. I would agree. All right. Well, thanks, everybody. Thank you, Alex, for commenting with us. If you're watching this in the replay, hashtag replay for us. Let us know. Hashtag no limits. No. Friday with Fran, hashtag.
How about bye?
Yeah.
Communicating.
All right. So you guys have a great week. Thank you for sticking with us throughout our connection issues today. And we will see you all next Friday on Friday with Fran. Bye, everybody.